We are here. It is Thursday, November 20th, 2025, and we have a lot of things going on in the world today. But most importantly, you have a lot of things going on in your world today, which is that you have people in your life who care about you, and that you should let those people know that you love them too, and that you're glad that they care about you, and that you care about them. And that is really what's important because the world is a crazy place, and it's nice to have people in our lives who can make it a little less crazy. So if you have that special someone in your life that you need to let them know that you care about them, that you love them, please do that, because life is short but great, and we should let the people know who make it great for us, even if it's a random stranger that waves hi to you every day, that you care about them, or that they make your life a little bit better, or that you love them too. We love each other, and we should continue to spread love. On that note, there is not a lot of love being spread in the United States government. Historically, that is accurate. But there's two things I really want to talk about today, which is the first is the executive branch. And there's kind of like a double-edged sword to the executive branch, which we see when we explore American history. The second thing I want to talk about is what it is like to grow up with a storybook version of America, and how a lot of people don't have that same opportunity to grow up with that storybook version of the country, depending on their background. Obviously, race and gender and religious affiliation are big ones, but also sexual orientation, and even really something that isn't talked about enough, just income. Depending on how much one makes, they see a different America, how much their parents made and how much they're able to get supported. They do not get the Disney version of America. No offense to Disney, which I grew up on, and Disney has its issues, but it's also a keen part of the American zeitgeist, as no one can deny. However, we often see that in the political world, in political storytelling, there's this push and pull between the storybook version of America and the real version of America, and often political storytelling is about trying to sell the storybook version, but sometimes that's not feasible when the storybook version of America is completely different than the reality. But that second topic will be behind the paywall. I'm so sorry. I really hate to do it, but your support makes the difference so that I can continue to do this kind of work. And really, I love it. I love talking to people. I love talking about current events, and I love learning. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in the world that has always been this way, not just modern, but it's just the way of the world, the way of human beings, we have to we had the barter system, now we have the capital system. So if you can become a paid supporter, I'd really appreciate it. If not, I understand. So this first part will be for you, and the second part will be for my paid members. And I love all of your support. So free or paid, just thank you for watching. Thank you for coming by. So, the executive branch is the presidency. And if anyone who knows basic American civics, there are three branches of American government: there's the legislative, and the executive, and the judicial branch. And the judicial branch consists of the Supreme Court and all the federal courts under it. Legislative branch consists of the National Congress. And then the executive branch consists of the president. And so, what we've been seeing in American history, though, is this ongoing expansion of the executive branch. And that ongoing expansion has done both good and bad things in American history. Obviously, it's done a lot of bad things, where you essentially, a country that there was supposed to be no kings, all of a sudden has a branch of the government that has the militaristic power and the agenda setting power to act as a king, and the increasing use of executive orders almost come off like proclamations from a monarch rather than a system of creating laws that goes through a bureaucracy and has checks and balances. On the flip side, the presidency has also been the avenue for a lot of social or economic change and they're both married. You can't unmarry social and economic change, as a lot of the centrist consensus from the 90s and 2000s tried to do, to the detriment of the Republican Party. We all know what Welfare Queens was about. There is a lot of change that the executive branch can push through, and a lot of our most well-known presidents have been surrounded by social and economic change. Andrew Jackson is simultaneously known for the devastating treatment of Native Americans, and their a policy that he started and then his successor finished or continued forward, and it succeeded into generations after that, of pushing Native Americans off of their homeland further west and doing it in often violent and underhanded means, and very important too, undermining the previous treaties that had been signed with those Native American tribes. And at the same time, Andrew Jackson in the storybook version of America is becomes known as this president that symbolizes the rising democracy in America. As non-landowning white males are able to vote, he represents the rugged individual, the frontier Americans who now are have access to political activity and thus see themselves in Andrew Jackson. And obviously, the current president models himself very much after Andrew Jackson. Again, you have Abraham Lincoln, who is known for the Emancipation Proclamation, but also at the same time expanded the executive branch and created the foundation for a emergency situation within the federal government in which the executive branch can step in and become a military chieftain and suspend habeas corpus and suspend people's rights. You see the same patterns with Lyndon B. Johnson in the 1960s, where he's known for simultaneously passing a lot of different economic and social rights legislation. But at the same time, he was the commander-in-chief during the Vietnam War and was not a declared war, but the use of the Gulf of Tonkin incident and the ideological fervor behind communism versus capitalism was something that he was able to create wartime conditions until Congress, too late into the game, started to question what was going on in Vietnam. And by then it was the late 60s, and there was a lot of soldiers already sent over, and soldiers would continue to be sent over in the next administration. And it kind of became a prototype for an example of a Congress that wasn't able to stand up to the presidency for a lot of reasons, for obviously being baited by the right of America's right wing for not being patriotic or, jingoistic enough, but at the same time too, because the presidency is now in charge of this massive military bureaucracy that we saw forming from the Civil War into the Vietnam War era, that is given the presidency surveillance and ground martial abilities, martial as in militaristic abilities that have just been out of the comprehension of the framers of the Constitution. That is where we're at now with President Trump, who is the simultaneously 45th and 47th president of the United States. And he has shown that he is willing to use both his martial powers and his agenda setting powers, often called the bully pulpit, which was, made famous with the way Theodore Roosevelt, another well-known president, the bull moose, was just out and talking to people and really connecting with them with these fiery speeches. And he was able to use the agenda setting powers of the presidency to build the political fervor and energy around holding monopolies accountable and powerful robber barons accountable. And Trump is able to do that with his pitch to people who felt that they were forgotten by the economy, people who don't like demographic change. That can be in terms of more women succeeding, more African Americans and other minorities succeeding, or it can just be in terms of pure cynicism of people who feel that the United States government has just become this massive unaccounted for bureaucracy, and that everyone is connected and networked and only looks out for their wealth and their future networks rather than the job of public service, which is the country altogether. And you can see that with skyrocketing wealth inequality in the country and kind of a return to Gilded Age conditions. We are now looking at the moment where we don't have someone who's in the executive who's really willing to even do the theater of restraint. They're just very open about not having restraint, and whether you agree with it or not, it's objectively what is happening, because perhaps the American people have become tired of the political theater of the past and now just want someone to break the fourth wall and look at them straight in the face and say, actually, this is what happens. Or because people are ideologically wanting to antagonize and harm people that they ideologically consider themselves to be against. There is a clear aesthetic with him that there is no restraint, and we saw that with the bulldozing of the East Wing and the remaking of the White House and the Presidential Hall of Fame, which is honoring that like great man version of history. We wish we could say great person, but unfortunately, men have put the thumbs on the scale for a long time. We are in a situation where Congress has abdicated a lot of its responsibilities as the executive branch expands, and has even stepped into the appropriations responsibility of Congress, which is Congress has the power of the purse. It's able to tax and spend. And that was traditionally seen as something that the most people oriented branch of government, which was the bicameral legislature, the House and the Senate, would have power over the money. Remember, taxation without representation. I'm sure you recited it in grade school. And that also goes with war making. Congress can only declare war, but as we have seen throughout my lifetime, a millennial, a late millennial, but also throughout the lifetimes of boomers and the GI and silent generations, that the president has often been able to skirt the war making powers outside of absolute historical examples. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of America do we find ourselves in now? And can we just rely on the president to always be restrained, or have the Constitution in mind, not as a suggestion, but as a binding social contract between the people and the officers of the public, the people, our public servants, including the president. This next part is a little bit personal. If you're not a paid subscriber, please become a paid subscriber if you want to keep listening. And thank you for listening to the first part. And just remember to enjoy the small things in life, because the ship of state, as they call it, will always be navigating in testy waters, no matter what we do. So just enjoy being a person and enjoy the